Very warm welcome, colleagues, to navigating a changing careers landscape, plugging the gaps through innovation and insight. This is our 30th webinar in the DMH Associates series. A very warm welcome to our guest speakers, Dr. Chris Percy. Chris, you might want to say a quick hello. Also to Tim Riley, Career Programme Lead at the Greater London Authority, and to the wonderful George-Kearney Bambridge, who I think has got a fabulous name, CEO of Envision. So do you all want to give us a wave before we hear more from you? Wonderful. What we wanted to do today, colleagues, was to seed a few ideas. And again, this image seemed to speak to me that it would be appropriate to seed ideas. And we thought we'd start off really with a poll, just as an icebreaker to get everyone warmed up, really, in terms of thinking about this topic of plugging the gaps. So I'm going to ask Robert if he would just activate the poll, and if we're having a technical glitch at our end, then I'll stop sharing and I can do so. Over to you, Robert. And Robert's a wonderful assistant in that he makes all the magic happen in the setup of these events. Fabulous. Here's our first icebreaker activity, colleagues. We want to really you to think about what will be the biggest change in the career guidance landscape in your region or your country over the next 3 to 5 years. And I'm going to force you really just to have a single choice question. No right and no wrong answers here. I just thought it would be interesting, given that we have people from all around the world joining us. 140 from different countries. Let's see if there's some commonality in this topic about navigating change and thinking about how we're going to plug the gaps. So just give you a few minutes. Thank you. I can see people are commenting here. Let's just have a very, very quick overview. I'll just give you another minute to do this. And can I also just say that one of the most important things of our webinar series is that we really like you to use the chat facility, say hello to colleagues, and also please throughout this session ask questions either in the chat or in a Q&A, because it's your voice that really makes a difference and brings alive the conversation. We have today booked in a little bit of time for you to go into a breakout session. So hopefully you might be able to network with somebody, make a new connection, but I'll say more about that shortly. So from a very quick glance, it looks as though the AI-powered personalization of careers is one of the big changes that colleagues have indicated. Yeah, still a few coming through, closely followed by that greater shift to lifelong learning and continuous reskilling. But isn't it interesting, really, that we've got something in all of those boxes, which means that for today, I'm sure that some of these topics actually will be of interest and may come up in our conversations today. So I hope everyone's had a chance to fill out the poll. I'm going to end the poll because it's just a little appetizer to get us in the zone of actually thinking about this. Okay, let's go on now to our next slide. So this is what we're going to do, folks. Today is very much about a two-pronged approach, focusing on two very complementary but contrasting examples of work underway in a changing careers landscape in England. Tim from London is going to focus very much around some of the findings from DMH Associates. I'll present some initial findings. Chris will talk about ROI, and then we'll hand over to Tim. We'll then have a very short breakout session, give you a chance to reflect, and then we'll be looking about learning more about key findings, collaboration and insights, building on that, joined by George from Envision. And at the end of the day, what we want you to take away from this session today is some real thoughts about what can you do? What can you take from today's session that might help you, whether you're a policymaker, a researcher, a practitioner, an academic, a student, etc. I just thought that I would mention the UN Sustainable Goals because, when we think about the UN Sustainable Goals, which were actually shared, almost a decade ago, it struck me that one of the things that we don't see in the UN Sustainable Goals is, if you like, how the world has changed. And really, just to summarize, and you might also want to add in the chat, tell us how you think the world has changed. Migration, war, conflict, people really feeling that pathways to learning and work are unclear, that support mechanisms in local communities, etc., are not perhaps what they used to be. And I think for those of us who use the UN Sustainable Goals to help guide our practice, it's really, really helpful to sort of think about how the world has changed. Today, our Chancellor of the Exchequer here in the UK has announced a new youth guarantee for young people. That's something that there has been a call for quite some time. So I think it's really important that we focus on, practical place-based initiatives where we can learn from them. And that's exactly what we're going to do. Tim, I have agreed that I'll kind of go through a few slides here based on the research that I led with Chris, with Lauren Kroll and with Robert. And a copy of the report is available, colleagues. I'll give you the link in the slides and I'll put it in the chat later. But Tim, can I put you on the spot for just a moment and tell me, how do you think, the landscape is changing from where you sit in London? Just a couple of headlines, and then we'll whiz through the London Careers Programme to whet people's appetites on some of these points that are here on the slide.
Yeah, I mean, how are things changing? I mean, from us in the London, situation, I think one of the things that's changing is how we fund our programs. That's a real challenge for us as we go forward. In the past, we've used European Social Fund, we've used UK Shared Prosperity Fund, but now we're sort of moving into sort of new, a new sort of phase of our programs, and I think that is something that's going to be important for us to navigate over the coming years. I mean, work experience is a huge thing in terms of the programmatic focus that we're going to be working on, and really making sure that we can do everything that we can to make sure that young people are engaging with employers. And that's a key part of what I'll, I guess, sort of talk about a bit later in terms of building an employer-led system in London. So yeah, just a couple of things.
Thanks, Tim. That's great. Well, Tim and his team commissioned DMH Associates to take a deep dive into the London Careers Programme, where it has some very distinctive features, for example, careers hubs and career clusters. And I'll just explain a little bit more about that. And then just to really go through some of the key findings. And then I'll hand over to Chris whenever we're sort of looking at some of the critical success factors as well. Wonderful to see colleagues from Sweden, from Athens, from London, from Sussex, from Norfolk. Keep putting in the chat where you're from and what's the weather like today. Let's go on. Let's have a little look at the context in the background. So DMH Associates is a research organisation, and we conducted this research from June of last year to February of this year. There was a total investment of 15.4 million into the formation of career clusters in the first instance and career hubs. There were 10 career clusters and 4 career hubs. if we had to say, well, what's the difference between the clusters and the hubs, you'll see one, that there's fewer of them, but two, that actually the whole idea was to pilot innovation and to look at a whole range of different types of projects that could foster innovation and indeed impact. And much of this work, for colleagues who aren't familiar with CEIAG, it's Careers Education, Information, Advice and Guidance. And you can see here the target audience was very much schools, colleges, alternative provision with young people who perhaps there were high levels of free school meals. Apologies, colleagues overseas, if some acronyms creep in, I will do my best to explain those to you. And again, Tim, feel free to chip in, you know, as is appropriate. Don't want this all to be about me just talking, as it were. But look, here's the context of London briefly. There's a surge in hard-to-fill vacancies. Where you are in the world, is there a surge in hard-to-fill vacancies? Because London's hard-to-fill vacancies rose sharply from 4 to 5%. To 14.5% between 2011 and 2022. And it's a narrative that we're hearing in all government agendas about how can we get better match between young people and adults and the available opportunities that are out there. In London, skills gaps are actually increasingly problematic for impacting on the workforce efficiency and business growth. Again, we're hearing a lot about across the world about businesses needing to grow their economies. And Tim's already talked about work experience and apprenticeships. London's employers provide more work experience than the national average here in the UK, but they do lag in school inspiration activities and apprenticeship participation. So we wanted to ensure that this project, that we had both quantitative and qualitative data. And again, you'll see here the numbers were quite impressive around the number of secondary school students who participated in a careers hub. Can I also just say that if we have careers hub leads here in this session, if we have enterprise advisors who are volunteers from industry, if we have employers, I really just want to thank you publicly for the great work that you do. In London, there is something called Cornerstone Employers, and this is something that the Careers and Enterprise Company, along with local or combined authorities, is doing throughout England, where it's looking to get some major employers to really, really drive home and emphasize the importance of employers opening up opportunities for young people. So feel free just to ask any questions in the chat, and Robert will keep me on the straight and narrow, as will Chris, if there are any specific questions. Now, there's 3 key challenges before we go into the critical success factors here. And I invite you to think, are these the same for you where you are? The structural issues. There's limited understanding of apprenticeships and technical education, particularly amongst teachers. There's cultural bias toward academic routes in some schools. And, you know, I'm of a certain age where this is a long-standing challenge. And I think we have to use today's session and indeed our work going forward to really think about how do we break down that cultural bias between academic and more vocational routes. And again, senior leadership team engagement varied and does vary across London significantly. There are operational challenges in any new initiative. It takes time to get the staff in place. And of course, then there have been high staff turnover and school capacity constraints in driving things forward. Transport is an issue for students. Data sharing difficulties between organisations, not unique to London, but something that's common across the world. How do we, moving forward, break down some of those data sharing difficulties? And of course, around the world, COVID-19 disruptions which did not only result in mental health and well-being factors, but also delayed contract confirmations. There's been funding constraints. Many people in this field talk about short-term funding cycles hindering long-term planning, a focus on numerical targets versus quality of engagement, and reduced employer investment in careers work due to economic pressures. So these are, if you like, some of the challenges. Let's just quickly think about the critical success factors. One is needs and gap analysis. And what London have done very well is analysing the needs and the gaps within the schools and really looking at the initiatives directly address the real and specific issues. A big shout out to Rebecca Fish, who's also on this call. Rebecca was a key driver here in actually making sure that we don't just in our work report on all the problems, but we use that critical success factors. The hubs and the clusters had lots of curriculum integration, embedding careers into the curriculum, which I will show you in a few minutes. Partnerships and small to medium enterprise engagement, making sure that it's not just the big employers who actually get involved, but the small and medium size as well. And in focusing on inclusivity and coordination, flexible placements, work visits to employers that actually have opportunities for those with special educational needs or disability. We call it SEND here in the UK, and alternative provision for those students who need it. So 2 other factors. I'll talk about effective connectivity, and I'm going to hand over to Chris. So one of the main critical success factors is when you have initiatives that are long-standing and come to an end or continue, and you have new ones come in that seem to overlap, I would encourage you in your work to think about how can initiatives be effective connectors working together between schools, employers, and sectoral bodies, building strong relationships with schools and colleges, and really keeping this relentless focus on access to future talent pipeline for employers. And ROI, return on investment, is, I believe, one of the critical success factors. Chris, you're an expert you're an economist, you're a tech innovator, you're a careers researcher, you know a lot about ROI, and you've worked with DMH Associates on these 2 projects. Just a few reflections from you.
Yes, thank you. I mean, if we talk about critical success factors, the big picture of critical success factors beyond any one individual project is a supportive policy and public infrastructure environment in which careers can flourish, in which careers is well supported and well funded. And there are lots of aspects of getting that right. You need the right workforce, you need the right vision. But part of it, particularly if you're engaging with Treasury and Finance ministries, is helping people outside the immediate sector understand the benefits of getting it right, particularly understanding the fiscal benefits of getting it right. And we're increasingly, both at DMH and other evaluators across this sector, increasingly bringing in a return on investment lens to some of the work. We think it's important, and it was wonderful that GLA were supportive of sharing the cost data and helping us analyze some of the impact data for this. It's not always available as an evaluator. Sometimes they like to hide away the details of how much things cost. But the GLA were very open, and they shared all sorts of cost breakdowns from their side, as well as what wasn't covered by their investments. Because, of course, careers happens through an enormous amount of funded and unfunded time within schools, premises that are used, teachers that are helping out, and employer time as well. And what we saw on this occasion, and as we see in more and more of these evaluations, which have an ROI component, is that even with a narrow lens on the types of benefits you get, you quite quickly get back more than you spend in terms of fiscal costs. So you saw a few slides back, 15 million invested by the GLA over a number of years in this initiative. If you track the impact in terms of improvement in careers provision via Gatsby benchmarks, You can trace that through to the likely level of improvement in students' sustained education outcomes after 16. You can see that the London hubs were already performing well on this. They continue to accelerate on this throughout the period, with the Gatsby benchmarks improving. Put all of that together, just on that measure, post-16 reduction in unemployment, we already saw greater fiscal returns being slightly higher than the investment that was put in over the relevant period. And if you start to think about all the other benefits that you would have for people who would have stayed in education anyway, making better choices for their career, being more motivated in the subjects that they choose, going on to do the right kinds of apprenticeships and university education and further education, taking all of that through into their early career, well, you would expect to have multiple folds of return on investment. And indeed, that's what we see in some of our other studies. But within JLA alone, with this narrow measure, it was already fiscally positive.
Great, Chris, thank you. And in the chat, just interested to hear if anyone else has been involved in ROI studies. We're always keen to learn more about your work, as well as you coming along to our webinars to learn more as well. So in the chat, it's great. I see really the whole diversity of people who are in this meeting. I've just come back from Malta, so a big shout out to colleagues in Malta there as well. Now, you might be thinking, well, what are these hubs? I think Tim will say a little bit more as I hand over to him, but I wanted to whet your appetite with a few examples, and these are just selected examples to whet your appetite to think about what does innovation look like, and is there a legacy that comes from this? So the 4 hubs in London, these are managed units funded by the Careers and Enterprise Company and the Greater London Authority. And here in central London, they actually focused on autism and virtual reality experience, not for the students, but for the 200 plus educators, really looking at, they had over 25,000, nearly 26,000 live viewers looking at talent talks and focusing on this subject. East London, I picked out one example of, they were visiting industry professional days for students. 9 sort of borough impact reports were produced to actually show the breadth of their work as a legacy, and those reports are used in a very practical way. Many of these examples are in the executive summary with a link that I'll share with you later. South London, an awards ceremony celebrating careers leaders, enterprise advisors and businesses here at our Old Vic Theatre. And these are continuing. And one of the most important things, really, I believe, in when we look at this subject of plugging the gaps, take time to celebrate and bring people together to actually learn from one another. And West London Hub, they had a Best Next Steps project with alternative providers, looking very much at using sort of modern recruitment practices in the TV and Film Skills Festival and with these major employers. Don't worry if you're here thinking, well, I'm in Sweden and I don't really know all of this in detail. You will get the link, and this is just to whet your appetite. The clusters actually were in place before the 4 hubs, and there were 10 of them. Now, I won't go through every single example here, but invite you to just look at the screen and just very quickly see that they ranged from things like employer engagement weeks, not just an employer engagement day. Here in England, the Gatsby benchmarks, which have been created by the Gatsby Foundation and supported by government and the Careers and Enterprise Company, or if you like, a blueprint that many of the schools follow. And what was interesting, Croydon, they were looking at that, but also had a very sharp focus on government offices looking at work experience. Again, another example looking at labour market information in the curriculum. Some are sector specific focused, as in Hillingdon. I'm not going to read them all because I think maybe you will be able to look at these slides and think, there's a real mix here of sector-specific, employer-specific, very much focused on opening up and widening opportunities. Number 10, you'll see on the screen, Diverso is a special educational needs and disability innovative program, and they engaged 50 micro businesses across 9 FE colleges and really have a very, very interesting model where they really are supporting more vulnerable young people into paid employment. So I'm going to hand over to Tim now in a second, but in the report, there are some recommendations for the GLA. One, the role of local government citywide, building leadership and sustainability, thinking about appointing senior champions to actually develop sustainable commissioning processes to bring about longer term change. Enhancing employer engagement, growing the number of volunteers and people from industry actually to go into the networks. To expand early opportunities, and Tim's got a slide he's going to share with you on primary and key stage 3 sort of secondary school settings. Key stage 3 would be very much here in the UK for sort of young people at that early stage of secondary schooling, but with a focus on technological innovation and AI and improving access to information. Again, finally, for the partnerships, it's all been about, can we get better data sharing and transparency? Can we achieve more flexible outcome-focused approaches? Have objectives, but build in flexibility. Don't be just driven by the numbers. Engage with employer networks. And inclusive agency training and youth voice, making sure that the voices of the citizens actually come through. So that's me very quickly. Tim, how am I doing for time? I think I'm not too bad in terms of there are lots of lessons learned here for the clusters and for the hubs. Everyone will get a copy of these slides. And again, you'll be able to get a copy of the recording. And I've given you access to the executive summary report here. What we built into this project is some immediate action steps, some medium-term objectives, and the long-term vision for more sustainable and equitable careers ecosystem that adapts to the changing market, the labour market. So Tim, if I may, apologies, my voice is a little bit croaky today, but Tim, can I just invite you to maybe spend just 10 minutes or so, just tell us what it's like from your perspective now. You've got this wonderful image on screen here, a big ship. It looks like a big ship to turn around, but actually I think it's the Merrill's official building. Over to you, Tim.
Thank you very much. And yeah, before I say a little bit about our programme, some of the things that we've got sort of happening, just want to say a big thank you to Deirdre and the team for all their work on the evaluation. We found it great working with the team, and we found the findings really useful in sort of helping us think about what we do going forward. Also, would like to thank the CC for all their support with the evaluation, particularly around data, and also to everyone who took part as respondents, including the hubs, and for the hubs for all of their wonderful work over the last few years. So thank you to everyone. Just a few things I'll say, trying to sort of pull out some of the kind of the key themes from my perspective. I mean, one, we Deirdre sort of talked about the sort of 620 odd thousand young people supported in schools and colleges in London. That's 723 schools and colleges that we're working with the hubs, and therefore we do need to sort of break it down into 4 sub-regional hubs in London. And I think one of the key findings that was great for us was to see that whilst we can all of the hubs will have particular things that they local priorities that they need to work on in the 4 sub-regions, they are able and do work really well together as a group alongside the GLA as well. And so where there are pan-London bits of work that need to happen, the hubs have done a fantastic job of coming together and doing those together. I've got one example of that up on the screen. This is the Next Steps in London magazine, which is published annually. It's a magazine that it's for young people, sets out all of the different pathways that they can take, spotlights key sectors in London, has case studies and lots of information about how to apply and interview and all those sorts of things. It's sort of led by one of our providers, Reed in Partnership, but has funding sort of pulled from the other hubs, and all of the hubs have some engagement with the content as well. So it's a really good example of everyone coming together. I mentioned the sort of the funding that we've used, and what we've tried to do is to maintain the scale of the hubs at the sort of the almost like the high watermark of the hubs that the CEC have funded. So as the CEC have needed to sort of reduce the number of staff in the hubs in London, we've been able to draw on the UK Share Prosperity Fund more recently, GLA core funds, and before that European funds to maintain the scale of the programme. We haven't had to reduce the number of people on the hubs, and we've done that really to make sure that we can try and sort of catch up on the Gatsby benchmark scores. We are a little bit below the national average because we started, I think, 4 years later than a lot of the other hubs in England. So we have been sort of playing catch up a little bit, and maintaining the funding, maintaining the number of posts within the hubs is something that we've really tried to do to make sure that we're able to really build strong relationships with schools and catch up on the Gatsby benchmark scores, and I think that's been going very well over the last couple of years. Onto the sort of the second strand, the direct delivery programs. The hubs themselves are delivering that sort of strategic capacity building across the system, but we've always been keen in the GLA to have direct delivery to young people as well. This is important for because we want to make sure that our program is really inclusive and that we are able to support young people directly who need a little bit of extra support in finding their way. So still on that previous slide, we tend to sort of try and focus the programs, as I say, on disadvantaged young people, whether that's those who've got risk of becoming NEET, send young people as well, a range of others as well. We try and make sure that we can get the most sort of value by providing services to those young people. We often try and focus on schools that have got lower Gatsby benchmark scores, not always, but we find that this direct delivery is a way of us to work with them a little bit more intensively and offer them some activity for their students. The idea that hopefully that can be something that helps them to appreciate the value of career services, and hopefully do something to help contribute to changing sort of culture within those schools. And what's really important has been a sort of close working between the hubs and the providers delivering this kind of work to ensure that there's a really integrated service for education institutions. There's the hubs, and they're kind of they're working very closely with the providers working with young people, because the hubs themselves are not working directly with young people in most cases. One of those sort of areas where we've done some sort of direct delivery with young people is around apprenticeships. London has lags behind other areas of England in relation to young people starting apprenticeships, and so this has been an area where we're really keen to make some improvements. For the last couple of years, we've run a program called Early Connect, funded by the DFE, our Department for Education. And as part of that, we've been providing one-to-one sort of brokerage and sort of group services as well, but largely sort of one-to-one brokerage and support for young people who need a little bit of help. They want an apprenticeship, but they're struggling to to get one. So we have given them really intensive support to try and achieve that. That's worked really well with Ask Provision, which has been a fantastic program in London over the years, which is all about raising understanding of apprenticeships and T-levels. So we were, as Early Connect came to an end, or is coming to an end now, and the Ask Provision ended in last July, we were concerned that would impact uptake of apprenticeships in London. So on the next slide, just a little bit of information about our sort of replacement funding and replacement program that we've set up for this academic year, which is called our Apprenticeships Information and Meaningful Encounters program, which is delivering activities similar to what Ask will have done in 190 education institutions, working with at least 36,000 young people, with the aim of driving up Gatsby Benchmark 7 and improving provider access legislation compliance as well. So that's on that. On the next slide, just a little bit around primaries. This is one of the recommendations in the report. It's a new area of work for us, and we're sort of very much in the exploratory stage, learning what we can do and what role the GLA might have going forward. So this year we're doing a range of pilot activities to try and sort of work out where we might go beyond this. And so that includes a range of activity. One is working with primary schools that have got careers weeks to understand, what seems to work well there and how we can provide support with those. Working with enterprise advisors, that's business volunteers who work with schools in our hubs, getting them to start working a little bit with the primary feeder schools that go into the secondary schools that they work with. That's a way of doing a bit of work with primary schools, kind of using the infrastructure that we've already got. We're looking at transition points in year 6 for young people. Particular focus there on getting a bit of interaction with parents, which is much harder to do in secondary education than primary in our experience. And then the last one is around My Path. It's a careers online platform that has content tailored to different age groups. So we've through our central London hub, we've managed to get access to all of the I can't remember exactly the number, 600 I think, primary schools in central London. So Reed have led on that, which is really interesting. Again, we'll look and see what the take up is, what people taking from it, and so we can see if there's appetite for that going forward. I mean, going forward, sort of taking a step back, I guess, we know in the GLA that we've got to sort of adapt our approach in the coming years to account for shift in the labour market. And so the Mayor published the London Growth Plan in March 2025, March this year, and set out a 10-year plan for London's economy, with high-level ambitions around productivity, inclusion, green growth, and ensuring London remains a global capital. As part of the growth plan, we committed to producing an inclusive talent strategy, which will sort of determine the direction of skills and employment provision, including careers as well, going forward. And in my last slide, just a few more little bits and bobs about that. I think the plan is that the strategy is being published, next month, the next few weeks. So I can't say too much about the detail of that, but the aim really is to set out how London will grow a skilled workforce and get more Londoners into quality jobs through an employer-led skills and employment system. It's going to be a workforce plan for the city, setting out how a range of partners are going to be working together to meet workforce needs for employers. And it's also going to be an inclusive plan addressing barriers that prevent Londoners from accessing the opportunities that are here. And I think there's two things to say about this from the careers perspective for young people. I mean, this is obviously a lot of this is going to be about adult provision, but there's a real recognition that the stuff that we're doing around careers in schools is a key part of that. It's the beginning, isn't it, when people are thinking about where they want to go. So, you know, the youth side is really important in all of this. And the last thing is that it's really important that what we're looking at, and what was laid out in the growth plan, is that we're looking at an employer-led system. You know, we've been working with, and our hubs have been working with a range of employers, both as the cornerstones, as enterprise advisors, and a range of other areas. I think making sure that when we try and bring a more coordinated system together, that employers are at the heart of it, is a great opportunity for us in the careers programme, and something we're looking forward to working on over the coming year. And that's just a little run through some of the key things, I think, from my perspective.
Tim, thank you so much. I can see already in the chat, you know, one of the top things that came out in one of the questions was about employer engagement. So I think what we should do is take some inspiration from that, which we can see unfolding in London. We want to very quickly go into breakout rooms, because feedback from colleagues who attend DMH Associates is that you all like to sometimes have a chance to meet someone else and reflect on what you've heard. We're running just a couple of minutes over, my fault entirely, but we did allocate, we'll give you 8 minutes. So we might bring you back in 5 minutes if that's possible. So I'm going to ask Robert to now put you into, if you like, a breakout room. And all we want you to do is say hello, network, and is there one thing that you've heard so far that really has jumped out and actually resonates with you in the context of your work? So over to your groups, and I'll see you shortly. We haven't got facilitators in. We're going to rely on you being professional, talk to each other, and very quickly say hello, and hopefully you'll get something.
Well, slight difference. Chris is in room 1, George is in room 2, and Tim's in room 3. And Deirdre, you've got room 4 between yourself. Okay.
Great. Lovely. Thank you, Robert.
Press the button now.
Let's go forward. Thank you. Hello. Hello. Hi.
Yeah.
I was just checking to see which room I was in there. Hello.
Thanks for joining today. Has anybody got any thoughts or any questions or any reflections?
Hello.
Hi there. Hi.
If I could, I'm trying to find out how I can raise my hand, so apologies, I didn't quite see how.
I'm not sure how this one works. Yeah.
I work in Hounslow for the local authority and have been involved, and I'm still involved with a careers cluster. The funding has run out from ESF, but at the moment we're getting it from elsewhere. I would say that having been involved for 5 years,
Hi, Deirdre.
Hello. 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 Hello there. I'm slightly worried that there's only 3 of us when there should be 80 of us. Can you hear me okay? Hello, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Fabulous. Just give it a few more minutes. It looks like we've only got 7 and we should have 80 people in our meeting. So that's a little bit worrying. And
the breakout rooms are now closed, so everybody should be gradually coming back.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. George, I was getting a little bit worried there, thinking that the technology gods were working against us even more than not being able to show my camera today. But I'm pleased to say that that's not the case. Robert will give me a signal whenever he can see that we've got everyone back again. Colleagues, that was just a very short chance for you to say hello to individuals and sort of reflect on what you'd heard already. How are we doing, Robert? Have we got everyone back?
I think everyone's back now. Yes.
Okay, lovely. So let's move into our really next important case study, which is around work that we've undertaken for Envision. I'm going to hand you over to George-Kearney, Bambridge. No introductions needed, George. Your profile's on our website. Over to you, and tell us again about the evidence from the programme that we've been working with you on.
Great, thank you so much, and thank you to Tim, Deirdre and Chris for that kind of really insightful piece. I was just saying the really thing that stood out for me was that idea of being the effective connectors between schools and businesses, and I know that's something that we're really kind of keen to think about how we do as a delivery organisation. So just a bit of background about Envision. So we are a UK-based charity, and we work with around 60 schools and colleges across 3 regions in the UK. We are really kind of driven by that belief that a young person's background mustn't determine their future. So again, really focusing on working with those less advantaged or disadvantaged young people. And we know that even obviously in the UK in 2025, there is still a huge divide between those 2 groups of young people, right? So whether that's kind of essential skills gaps or access to opportunity, whether it's educational success, earning potential, or even kind of health and well-being, we know that that gap still exists. So despite a lot of kind of an increased focus and number of interventions across the UK, the youth employment rate continues to really remain high. So I think currently it's around 4 young people in a class of 30 that's likely to not be in education, employment and training. And so we know that there is this real increasing need for intervention for young people who are already outside of education, employment and training. But we believe that actually, we're talking about return on investment, we believe we can have bigger impact by intervening early and helping young people, prevent young people from being NEET in the first place. So ultimately, that being a better return on investment, but also hopefully supporting young people, setting them up for success at an early stage and eliminating some of those wider effects of being NEET in the first place. So in a moment, I'm going to share just a short video of what we do and the way that our work happens. But just as a bit of context, so obviously less advantaged young people in the UK are around 50% more likely to be not in education, employment and training than their kind of better off peers. And only half of that gap can be explained by academic qualifications. So we at Envision really aim to address the other half of that gap. And we think that essential skills development is really, really key and integral to being able to do that. And when we talk about essential skills, we're really specifically talking about those kind of transferable skills that go and grow with you and that you need in every kind of walk of your life. There is a really increasing evidence to demonstrate the link between essential skills levels, outcomes and kind of well-being and happiness. And we're really pleased actually over the past kind of year or so, there's starting to be that increased focus from kind of within the curriculum review and within policy. And we know that there's a real need to continue that as we think about the ever-changing careers landscape. And we were just commenting in our breakout room about there is so much going on, right? How do we kind of keep on top of all of these various different kind of policy shifts and changes and what's happening? But for us, what we think is actually, you know, there's so much kind of movement within the AI works, within the AI space, within kind of careers for future, within jobs for future. Essential skills really, really underpin that. So we think that that's actually really about giving young people the opportunities to intentionally develop these skills. Because if young people aren't having that opportunity to do that, they're almost ending up in this kind of skills trap. So having less opportunity, lower skills levels, lower skilled jobs, lower life satisfaction, lower earning potential, and it kind of just gets lost in this little bit of a loop. And for us, and then if you add things like AI on top of that, you see that actually initial research suggests that it actually could exacerbate that issue, and it could make that skills trap even worse for those young people from disadvantaged backgrounds. So ultimately, what we're trying to do is empower those young people and think about how we can support them to be able to develop their skills and the confidence that they need for their future kind of opportunities. We're just going to share a really short video to say how we do that.
Here at Envision, we deliver in-school programs that empower young people to develop the essential skills and confidence proven to support their education, employment, and well-being. Guiding them every step of the way is their Envision program coordinator. Together, they meet each week to develop a social action project in their school community. We also partner each team of young people with a team of mentors from a local business. Throughout the program, they will develop 4 essential skills. These are the all-important skills needed for, well, everything. First, they design their project, sharing ideas and agreeing on a goal. Next, they develop their plan using feedback from their mentors. Then they deliver their project, making a positive change in their community. At a final cross-school event, the team showcase their skills development and project achievements before the winning team walks away with the Envision trophy. Young people then reflect on their journey and all they have achieved. At every stage, we support young people to develop their essential skills, build their confidence, and drive change.
Hopefully that gives you a very, very really quick insight into the kind of work that we do and the way that which we do it. I think the key things for us is that actually, you know, all of our work supports young people from less advantaged backgrounds, but so particularly those students who may get overlooked in a school setting. And for us, that's kind of those silent middle young people. They're the ones that aren't accessing kind of support for gifted and talented, or those kind of truanting and missing school. So that those young people that could easily kind of slip below the radar, and we want to make sure that we are intentionally targeting those young people. We're also trying to ensure that we're providing those early opportunities to develop skills with rigor and intention. So we believe that those essential skills can be developed with the same intentionality as academic qualifications. And this is part of the all the kind of research and evaluations that we are doing and have been supported by through the DMH Associates as well. We want to make sure that actually these skills are able to be developed and we can actually kind of evidence and showcase those things. And
apologies, I'm having a little bit of problem here with accessing their slides, so bear with me, George.
No problem. I can just continue. I mean, I can talk about this. So I'll continue to chat about it whilst we hopefully the slides will catch up.
Thank you.
And I think another thing I would pull out here is that one of the key things that we do is really work in partnerships with schools and businesses. So really enhancing that employer engagement piece that we learned earlier is so important when we think about the careers journey for young people. We partner teams of young people up with those teams of mentors to work collaboratively, really supporting that equal power dynamic on their social action projects, where both elements of the party are bringing their kind of expertise on issues impacting their school community versus expertise on how skills are used in the world of work. And it creates that really kind of powerful learning environment for everybody involved. So there would be a lovely slide here that says all about kind of how the different skills link to Envision and also Skills Builder. So all of our work is underpinned by the essential skills framework of Skills Builder, and that is kind of links back to the kind of curriculum, the way that we look at that. Perfect, it's appearing, perfect timing. But back in 2020, we actually worked with Skills Builder to design and develop our essential skills. And this is taking Skills Builder's eight skills and condensing them into 4 so that we can deliver that through our program and through the projects itself. We then look at our kind of baseline and endline surveys to look at the development of those 4 skills over the course of our 12 or 20 week programs. And this is some of the kind of data that we're going to unpick in a moment. Chris is going to very, very kindly walk us through in terms of some of the evidencing and impact on that side of things. So we often do internal evaluations ourselves, but really what we want to do is make sure that we're opening ourselves up to external evaluations and benchmarking to make sure that that is also evidencing some of that work. So lastly, just before I hand over to Chris, we very kindly, through Mercer's, was funded for a 3-year project to look at expanding the delivery of our post-16 programme in London, and both then working with DMH Associates to look at the fidelity and the outcomes of our programme and how we continue to bolster the kind of impact and transition opportunities for young people. Chris and the team have obviously looked at the progress of our Envision students in relation to kind of control groups, and we're really thrilled that this year's report actually just builds on some of the success from the previous year's report. But Chris, I'm actually going to hand straight over to you to kind of delve into the detail of all of that.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Yes, so let me explain how we went about evaluating this lovely programme. So this was a quantitative evaluation. Obviously, best practice in evaluation involves qualitative components and hearing the voices of stakeholders in different settings. For this one, it was a more focused approach, but let me take you through it. So even before we bring in comparison groups, we can just look at the data that's gathered by Envision. They have a baseline survey normally around October of the academic year and an endline survey filled in by their student participants in around May. So you've got some measure of just self-reported skills progress. But then, we know that over the course of, 8 months and, the best part of an academic year, we expect young people, we hope anyway, we hope that young people will make progress anyway. So how do we know that the progress that is reported is actually faster than would have happened otherwise? Well, we've got 2 ways, or 2 data sets we compare against, and then 2 ways of comparing them. So one is we look at what we're calling business as usual. Now, there isn't really such a thing as business as usual, but it's a shorthand here for the kinds of schools and colleges who are using the Skills Builder framework, so the same questions, and they are asking young people of a similar age to self-report on the same sorts of questions, and sometimes they might be measured 3 months apart, or 8 weeks apart, or 2 years apart, and we've got that as some sort of a benchmark. The other one, so that's business as usual, whatever is happening in schools and colleges, which will include some skills dedicated programs, but will also just include normal practice. Then you've got dedicated programs, which is a bit more like Envision itself. These are typically social impact programs. Again, they are using the Skills Builder framework, so their young people are answering the same sorts of questions, but these are gathered by typically the charity partner, a non-profit partner. I'll show you 2 sets of numbers, both if you just take those numbers, compare them directly against each other, and then if we try to adjust for the fact that obviously these are different groups of young people. The way this detail is in the report, I don't think you need too much of the detail here. The key thing is that we end up with a score from 0 to 1. And we can connect the Skills Builder framework to the Envision essential skills because they're designed to be the same sort of thing. One is a subset of the other. So key thing to remember, 0 to 1, where 1 is you're doing these skills always and 0 is you're saying you're doing them never. So bigger number is better. And this is the first bit of progress we see. So this is without any comparison groups. This is just where the young people ended up on average from October to May, more or less, in their time with Envision. And you can see that we've got a pretty substantial increase. It's a 0 to 1 score, and they're going up from things like 0.6 to 0.8. This is highly statistically significant, and they're quite substantial changes in most circumstances. But would students do this anyway? Let's look at the next slide, please. Looking at the published data from Skills Builder, so this is before we get into statistical analysis. This is what Skills Builder published already in their annual impact reports. You can see how much progress young people tend to make as they go from one school year to another anyway. Now, this is on a different scale. This is on a 16-point scale, not a 1-point scale, so we've got to adjust it a little bit. But once you do that adjustment, you end up seeing, well, you can sort of see it on the screen, between years 11, 12, and 13, there are small increases, but it's quite flat. And this is a well-known problem with education provision in England, that it's fairly flat in secondary school, despite quite rapid progress in primary school. Nonetheless, if you take the numbers at face value, what we saw is about a sort of 0.15 sort of gain. The type of progress you're seeing in business as usual, is much less. Compared to 0.15, it's sort of 0.02 or something. It's really very little. It ends up being, really most of that gain is not happening. Let's look at the next slide. So let's compare to a business as usual setting. But Skills Builder, they also report, again, this data is available publicly. We'll get to the adjustments in a slide or two. They also do work with dedicated programs like Envision. One subset of those is the accelerator schools. And these accelerator schools, they are working hard over a year of support with the SBP team. They're training teachers. It's a whole schools approach. As soon as you do that, you see much faster progress than you do in this kind of business as usual setting. And it ends up being comparable to the Envision numbers. Maybe it's slightly lower, but it's about a 0.1 progress on a 0 to 1 scale compared to 0.15, but comparable, given all the uncertainty in these measurements. Okay, let's go to the next slide, because these are just descriptive comparisons. And we know that the Envision cohort is not necessarily the same as the kind of cohorts that are being analysed in the data I've just shown you. For a start, Envision is working with most at-risk cohorts rather than whole cohorts. Oh, please, let's stay on the previous slide for another moment, if we go back one slide. There's also differences in terms of the time gaps. So some of these surveys took place over just 2 weeks, or they took place over 12 months. And we hope that young people are making progress over that. So we want to compare against this around 8-month gap with Envision. So those are some of the things we want to adjust for. Let's go on to the next slide, and I'll draw out some of the key issues. So one of the key issues we want to adjust for is that some young people report negative progress. This is true both in the Envision data and in the Skills Builder data. So it's not some sort of great insight about the program. This is just maybe what happens with young people when you ask them and they wake up in a good mood one day and they wake up in a bad mood, 8 months later, even though they probably have made some progress. So the solution to this was we ran the results both on the full sample and just with the negative progress students. But it's an important aspect of the data to be aware of. Let's go to the next slide, please. We also see, and this is a common feature in analysis, but it needs to be adjusted for, we often see that students who had a low score to start with tend to make the most progress. And you can kind of think of this because there could be a whole range of reasons. Maybe when you first ask them, they were just having an unusually positive day, and then you get more like the average picture later on. Or it could be that lower skill starting points, it's easier to make progress. All sorts of reasons for this. Our solution for this is a statistical solution where we include the baseline score as a control variable. The most important thing I want to emphasize to you is that you've got the same pattern in the benchmark data. So whilst this is a subtle aspect of the data, it doesn't negatively impact the evaluation because of the methods we apply. Right, let's look at the results. Oh, well, before we get to the results, I need to tell you where we got the data from. So Skills Builder were kind enough to share kind of 2 million individual skill step scores from their data over a number of years. We then did a number of adjustments. We can only look at people who give us 2 points in time. Otherwise, we haven't got that longitudinal tracking from baseline to end line. We then did a number of steps. They needed to line up with the same questions that Envision asked. And we needed to, if they had multiple surveys available, we chose the ones that were as close as possible to the Envision cohort. But then we adjust it further. So if we go to the next slide, we also can adjust the data for some of the differences. So what you can see here, if I draw your attention to the intervention benchmark, so this is the one where the sample size is 226, second up from the bottom. So this is one of the groups we would like to compare against Envision because they're also doing social impact programs. But you can see that their gap between surveys was around 90 days compared to the Envision data, which is 8 months, nearer to 200 days, which, as it happens, is quite close to the average overall in the full benchmark. So we want to adjust for this. You can also see on here that the intervention benchmark tends to be a bit older than the Envision one, even selecting the best ones we can, and they tend to have a higher starting point. So Envision really is working with the most disadvantaged young people by this measure of skills. So we adjust for this statistically by including them as in controls in a regression analysis. Let's go to the next slide. So the method is described in a bit more detail in the report, but what I want to say is these are the things we're adjusting for. It's the gender of the participants, the days between surveys, and the age, and the baseline score. And as a result of doing that, we ended up explaining kind of 30 to 50% of where people end up. So these models are quite good at explaining people's end line scores. So first of all, again, comparison to business as usual, and then the next one will show you comparison to the more intervention cohort. But let's stick with the first slide on the previous slide. If we go back one slide to the, if we could go back yeah, there we go, that's the one. So here we can see the coefficient is the key number. It's a scale from 0 to 1, remember? So 0.15. That tells you that the Envision cohorts were on average doing 0.15 better than the business as usual, once we've adjusted for age, starting point, and time gap between surveys. Statistically significant, very strong positive findings. On the next slide, please, we see the results against dedicated skills programs. So these are other charities, a bit like Envision, but admittedly highly varied, but conceptually more similar to Envision than business as usual. And here we do not see statistically significant differences. Here they're both, if you like, they are both outperforming by broadly the same amount relative to the business as usual. In fact, there's only one result which is statistically significant at the 5% level, which is in the bottom right of this table. And it so happens that Envision outperformed in this particular setting. But really looking across the whole piece, the right statistical insight is that all of these programs are adding, on average, a comparable amount of value compared to business as usual. And I think my next slide is the last one before I hand back to George. So what do we draw from this? Well, the additional year's data showed the same sorts of results as last year. We are seeing significant outperformance relative to business as usual. So that supports the finding that the idea that these findings are not just a one-off. They are sustainable. We also see that the second half of Envision's funding, and they were very fortunate in this environment. The topic came up in the chat and in the breakout group I was in around multi-year funding support compared to, a lot of funding can be 1 year in duration or even less. The Envision program had higher impact in the second half than the first half of its sort of 4-year funding. So I would strongly encourage funders that are out there, and indeed others bidding for funding, draw on this research. You'll find the detail in the report. The impact improved significantly in the second 2 years compared to the first 2 years. And this kind of benchmarking is really only possible because Skills Builder have got their universal framework data, because they were able to make it available for this and support us with the analysis. So a big thank you to Skills Builder and to others thinking about doing this kind of analysis. Let's see if we can get more funding and more resource to unlock this kind of benchmarking. Let me hand over to George for her final reflections.
Yeah, I just thank you so much, Chris. Definitely did a much better job of explaining that than I ever could. So huge thank you. I think, I was just kind of pull out a similar reflection, really. We're really pleased that this kind of research echoes our own internal findings, but more so it highlights that the work being done by ourselves and other kind of dedicated programs like the Skills Builder Accelerator programs and other programs like that can have that proven measurable impact on young people's skills outcomes. Ultimately kind of, setting them up for success in the future. And I think that point, when I first read this report, that point that really stuck out to me was also about that kind of long-term multi-year funding and how that really actually amplifies the impact that we can have. And I'm sure actually all of us on this call can see that on the ground, but it's nice to have some evidence points to really back that up and do that as well. So we're hoping that kind of continuing with things like this kind of evaluation and benchmarking can also help to focus that funding and priority behind essential skills in the future and really kind of make that case for support. But a massive thank you to Deirdre and Chris for all your support on this as well. It's been great.
Well, George, I have to say that it's been a real pleasure working with the Envision team, and also want to just give a shout out to Lauren Kroll, who's one of our team members as well, who's actually been out visiting and doing quite a lot of the field work around how do we get these surveys really to be the most effective that they possibly can. So thank you to both of you. Thank you so much to Tim, and most importantly, thank you to the audience. I can see in the chat, and I've had a few messages from people saying they have to do a school run or pick up their children, but look forward to receiving the recording. We will actually be sending out the recording from this session to all, and we really just thank you for taking a real interest in this important topic. To bring things to a conclusion, I really just want to say, George, if anyone wants to find you in terms of reaching out to you outside of this meeting, I know they can find you at Envision, but you might just want to put your contact details or someone in your organisation into the chat, and Tim as well, or we'll send it out with the recording and the slides. Just wanted to wrap up really around, we've been talking about innovation, and we've been really talking about impact. And I wanted really just to finish really by highlighting where we started, which the audience was recognizing that AI and personalized guidance is something that we're going to see more of. And both our speakers, all of our speakers have touched on it. So really just to say there's a new Career Chat UK careers resource for practitioners, for teachers, for others. It's in the form of a flip book. Here you'll have the link. And if you want to find out more about how we're using AI responsibly in this context, then just get in touch. Both Chris and I wear multiple hats, but one that we're very proud of is as co-founders of Career Chat UK, pioneering technology and AI chatbots. We've got another Career Chat UK webinar on the 8th of October, focused on AI literacy. It links in well with skills. We're all talking about AI literacy, but what is it really? So please do come along and hear from Matthew Vimes, who is a global expert on this topic. And really just to say, if there's anyone here who is a practitioner and you're working at the grassroots with young people, a while back we did produce something called Building Brighter Futures, a practical toolkit. If you haven't heard of it before, again, you'll get the link. Please use this in your work with young people and adults if you find it helpful. Just a very big thank you to our speakers. Thank you to you. This series started during lockdown. We're on our 30th. Can you believe it? And it wouldn't be possible if it wasn't for people like George and Tim and many of our other partners who not only commission us to produce reports, but they really, really are dedicated to making sure that the lessons learned can indeed be shared with others. So a very big thank you to you all. Hopefully you'll have met someone new today that you can network with, and hopefully you'll join us again for our next DMH Associates webinar. Look out for that information. Thank you very much, everyone. And I do apologize. We have had a little technical few blips at this end at DMH Associates, associated with me buying a new laptop to make me more efficient and actually make my life easier. Anyway, thank you so much, everyone. Take good care, and remember, each and every one of you, that your work is really important and it does make a positive difference to people's lives. So keep going, and thank you.